This program is brought to you by
Ladies and gentlemen, as we today continue to discuss what is very vital, it's true that the world is actually experiencing a lot with news happening at every corner of the world. But today we continue to give relevance to the May 9th event, particularly the event in the Russian Federation faced with foreign policy challenges and external pressures. Russia under President Vladimir Putin against the May Day festivities, marking the state's its first anniversary to remind citizens of their shared history. May 9, 2026 in Russia marked a day of remembrance, that of hope and resilience in a rapidly changing world of new global realities. The historical commemoration honored the generation that defeated the Nazi Germany, whose sacrifice shaped the post-World War and whose courage still informs how nations understand sovereignty, security, and moral purpose. In Moscow's renowned Red Square, leaders recalled the decisive role of the Soviet people on the Eastern Front and linked that legacy to contemporary challenges. For many, the memory of 1945 is not a distant past, but a reminder that the defense of the homeland and the protection of fellow citizens demand unity, resolve, and enduring sacrifice. What we see among Russians in contemporary society, ladies and gentlemen, the horrors of 1945 engulfed over 26 million Soviet citizens. This year's observance therefore exposed divergent memories across Europe, while Russia gave importance to this event because it's actually very important in defining the global transformation of Russia in contemporary society. Some of the countries, particularly in Europe, marked the liberation. For others, it recalls somehow a subsequent occupation and difficult chapters of local history. But then, what is the veracity of that? How can we take what happened in history to define how a country's trajectory is being defined, particularly in terms of defense and security? Of course, in the border cities, civic acts and, of course, counter messages underscored how wartime memory continues to shape identity and political discourse in contemporary society. Today, the Baltic countries have been pressured to invalidate Victory Day celebration, particularly on the 9th of May. And we also recall that the ribbon of St. George, called in some European countries as illegal, and it brings us again to asking questions. During this year's celebration, controversy came especially from Estonia, where a picture of the Russian President Vladimir Putin was actually published with a message attacking him as a warlord. And of course, some people linking the leadership of the Russian Federation to the likes of then German Hitler. And of course, we look at how these narratives can, of course, affect Russia's diplomatic image and, of course, its foreign policy standing. So, ladies and gentlemen, on this edition of Global Insight, we will examine with a panel of experts the relevance of Victory Day to the Russian Federation and other countries around Eastern Europe, and how Western Europe and others have actually, taken this Victory Day to denote other aspects which we just highlighted in our preamble. So it is imperative that we continue to analyze the memories that shape Russia's future, providing it with a scope, particularly to avoid being taken aback by events similar to the realities of the First World War, the Cold War, and a more contentious 21st century geopolitical antagonism against the Russian Federation, Eastern Europe, and its allies. So, ladies and gentlemen, together we are going to uncover this program and, of course, this topic together, looking at the relevance of this Victory Day celebration of the 9th of May 2026, stating the 81st anniversary of great relevance, of course, because for a nation to define its future, it is imperative to think about yesterday, bring about the realities of yesterday into this world and see how this can shape the future of the world. I will join you right after the jingle to uncover this panel to give us insight on our topic for discussion this day. Welcome back. If you are just tuning in, you're most welcome. This is Global Insight brought to you by Globus. Time for us to introduce the panel. And of course, we are delighted to welcome you this day, dear Conrad Ricketts, a journalist, a financial analyst, and of course, chair of Scottish Rest. Yes, for Independent Scotland. It's a pleasure having you this day on this discursive program.
Great to be here again, and thank you for invitation.
Always a pleasure. And without much ado, let's now head to India, acknowledging the presence of Purnima Anand, President BRICS International Forum. It's always a pleasure having you, madam. Looking forward. Your mic is muted, please.
Thank you, Clarice. I am very happy to come on Globus channel. Now it is becoming Voice International Arena, and very happy to see many friends from different countries. And I hope today we will have very good discussion on very important Victory Day. Thank you.
Indeed, it is imperative to have a constructive discussion on the Victory Day, particularly on the narratives pertaining the Russian Federation, given the proliferation of information on mainstream media, especially on the speech of the Russian Federation this year. And without much ado, let's welcome Ultima Public journalist and IEC Lawyers Guide Observer joining us from the United States of America. Welcome.
Thank you again for the invitation, and happy to be here. Looking forward to a great discussion on a great topic today.
Indeed, it's a great topic to better understand global transformation. It is relevant as well to look at history and how it can shape the future world. And we stay in the United States of America to welcome political commentator who is also ex-advisor to the Bush and Clinton administration, and also a journalist in the person of Steve Gill. A pleasure having you this day, Steve.
Thank you, Clarice. Thanks to the panelists for all joining. It's good to see so many good friends today.
Indeed, it's good to see so many good friends as we continue to talk constructively. Before we actually get into your analysis of the topic, and of course, especially on the conceptual framework of the topic, I will invite us to watch this moment in Congo Brazzaville, a moment that saw the Global Association of Exports together with the government of Congo Brazzaville and in collaboration with the Russian embassy in that part of the country actually commemorated this day, honoring those that actually fought for motherland during the Second World War that saw the defeat of Nazi Germany. Just to note that this event was actually a moment in Congo Brazzaville, precisely in the capital, to actually recall the memories of the century, to recall the horrors and how the horrors of the 1945 event can shape today's future, to remember those that lost their lives. We're talking about over 26 million Soviet citizens that actually died during the war, and we cannot actually forget the role that was played by allies, a nation, particularly Congo Brazzaville and other African countries that actually took part in this, very tragic, of course, tragic because of the human loss of lives. But today we are in a different world, trying to define new realities. How can we shape human relationship? Taking examples from what happened many years ago. It's actually a moment that it came to mind, the philosophy of the St. George ribbon, that history, of course, that dates back to 250 years. And of course, this ribbon symbolized a lot about the Russian Federation, the former Soviet Union, with the black color symbolizing the smoke and the orange, the flame. And this altogether represented the struggle, the strength, the spirit, and the rebirth. And of course, also symbolizes some sort of combat, resilience, and the resurrection of life from ashes. We can notice, of course, a candle lighting ceremony to immortalize the events of this war that actually saw a lot in terms of human loss. And that was just to give us a holistic presentation of the event of May 9th in Congo Brazzaville under the auspices of Global Expert Club. And I'll be coming to the studio this time around, ladies and gentlemen, as I join our esteemed panel to get into the conceptual analysis of the Victory Day and why it is still imperative to commemorate it the Russian way as it is done in contemporary society. And I start off with you, Steve Gill, as you give you a historical analysis of our topic for today that zooms on remembrance and hope and resilience, particularly in the context of new global realities. Steve Gill, your mic is muted, please.
I think, can you hear me now?
Sure, I can hear you now.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm going to have to depart very soon, but I wanted to underline that while the ceremonies that took place in Russia and other locations commemorating the Russian role in defeating the Nazis in World War II, and as you mentioned, the horrific losses of both civilian and military personnel, 26 million, that in Western Europe and throughout the United States, not only has there been little, if any, mention of this contribution by Russia to defeating the Nazis, but it's actually almost been written out of the history books. You've had many in Western Europe and in the United States downplay the role of the Russian involvement in defeating the Nazis to pretend it just simply didn't happen or that it was not really very important. And I think, history is important. There's good parts and bad parts, but you have to deal with the truth, what happened, even if you have changed your perspective over time. And I think it's important that we recognize that this sort of diminishing or eliminating the history of what Russia did during particularly the conclusion of World War II in defeating the Nazis, the losses that they suffered, not being able to commemorate those with other allies. I mean, the United States and Western European allies should have been there, as they have been in years past, pointing out the role of the Russian military and the civilians who suffered so greatly. So I just want to make sure that I helped underline today that Western Europe and the U.S. media have completely not just ignored, but literally washed away that role in the history books and in the media coverage, which is despicable.
I will stay with you, Steve. Let us understand why people, especially in Europe, celebrate this Victory Day differently. To note that some countries choose the 8th of May and not the 9th of May, just like the Russian Federation. And what will you say regarding the latest development where the Baltic countries are even prohibited from celebrating or commemorating the Victory Day, especially the Russian way?
You know, one of the most interesting aspects of the celebration to me was when the Ukrainians denied Russia being able to be involved in the celebration in Kharkov. And I think our brilliant friends in Russia used a drone to drop a bouquet of flowers on the memorial on that day, just to make it clear, look, you might keep us away, but we're still going to play a role. I mean, that was, to me, a brilliant move, and again, highlighted the fact that excluding people who should have been there was not acceptable. It's interesting that because we have had this demonization of President Putin, of Russia, by the Western Europeans, by NATO and others, you know, and again, dating back even to the Russia hoax with President Trump, Russia has been demonized in the West, in the United States, to the point that you can't even have athletic teams compete with each other because of the politicization of sport, which should never be done. So again, I think it's this overreaction, this sense that as I appear in media in England and throughout Western Europe, I swear they think that the Russian boogeyman is under their beds. And they keep arguing that Russia can't and has not been able to make any gains in eastern Ukraine. And yet at the same time, they have this adamant fear that if they don't stop Russia in Kharkov and Kiev, that they'll be in Berlin and London and France tomorrow. So which is it? Either the Russian army is not weak, is too weak to defeat Ukraine, or is going to be in Berlin and London tomorrow. I mean, their fear playing is not accurate, but I think that's been a big role in diminishing the historical relevance and recognition of what happened at the end of World War II.
Indeed, and now we are looking at how countries can shape their future based on historical narratives. With you, Steve, before you go, so how can we do this? Take the probably from the examples of from the Second World War and even the other world wars that marked the global world, to redefine or to reshape narratives of of each country, particularly in terms of defense and security in this new dispensation of a multipolar world?
I think the bottom line is you have to deal with truth, and that's why shows like this and others are so important. You have to deal with truth. I mean, look, war is good, bad, heroic, and ugly, and at the same time, you've got to deal with what happened in reality. And again, when you start diminishing history, ignoring portions you don't like, or what has changed over time that your allies then are now adversaries today, economically, militarily, whatever. You have to deal with truth. And I think, again, that's why panels like this, I think your show, Clarice, helps do that on a whole host of issues to make sure that we're telling the truth, even if it makes some people uncomfortable.
Absolutely, it's about telling the truth and understanding the real stakes of the Second World War that actually led to the defeat of Nazi Germany, and how this actually changed a whole lot of, especially in terms of international relations between Germany, Russia, and other Eastern and Western countries. But then we continue to understand the event that marked the probably the beginning of the war. Let me come back to you, to you this time around, Conrad Request. We are still in the preamble, understanding these events, the war, and how it led us to this, the moment of defeat of Nazi Germany, and how this has shaped relations between Germany, Russia, and international relations, maybe Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and how it is affecting future.
Orwellian phrase, who control the past and control the future, who control the present, control the past. And this popular slogan is, well, as much true as we can see now in the present state of geopolitics and international relations. We are witnessing reshaping of the history, and rewriting the history to achieve bigger control over the future events. We can observe that also in relation to the this year anniversary of the victory over Nazism. There is the significant change of narrative. There is a significant change in propaganda language used to use people with the war, with this militarization of language. For many years, even in the hardest years of the Cold War between the West and the East, almost everyone was talking about the peace. Yeah, that's of course all these actions, all these political decisions, in theory, have been aimed on peace. Now, when we observe propaganda, especially in the Western European media and politics in the United Kingdom, in France, but also in Germany, we can see that war is no more excluded from the public debate. War is something which is only a question of time, and this is very significant change, very dangerous, of course, because when you speak about the rifle on the stage, in the last act, this rifle is going to shut. That's the point. Yeah. Of course, we have to also remember about the beginnings of the Second World War. It's not only started just suddenly because Germans invaded Poland. We had a lot of proxy wars before it has happened. We had fascist Italian invasion against Abyssinia, against Ethiopia. That was one of the very important steps toward the war. We had civil war in Spain. We had Japanese invasion against China. So this war have been already prequeled by former events. And again, it's quite similar to the situation we can observe now in the world. So it's not like the Third World War could just suddenly happen. We can see that there are some small movements all over the world which bring us closer to the war. And that's something we have to remember, not only because of this anniversary, but because it's very in the wider scale, could possibly changing our future, the future of our children.
Indeed, it's about thinking about the future and how we can use the past to shape the future. In the same perspective with you, ultimately, let's get the historical context, especially about key factor and how the Eastern Front's scale and the Soviet contribution to the defeat of Nazi Germany under Hitler.
Well, thank you again, Clarice, and certainly the backdrop of all of this was the
Dear
beginning
Elnan,
of
please can you mute your mic when talking? Sorry for that. Just to remind you guests who are logged onto Zoom, please, if you are not talking at the moment, kindly mute your mic so we can reduce the interruption. Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you, and welcome to the other panelists, and glad to be here with such esteemed people. Sorry that we're having a little bit of technical problems, but I know that those things are being worked out, and they always are a challenge. But the backdrop for what happened in World War II certainly was preceded by what happened in World War One, which happened as it culminated in the middle of the Berlin Conference. And of course, the Berlin Conference was about how colonialism was going to be developed where the African continent is concerned. And Germany's involvement and its efforts and its precipitation of the conflict in Europe was directly related to what was going on at the Berlin Conference and that division and that essentially dissecting of the African continent and partitioning of the African continent. European countries were upset about what they were getting in terms of that division of the African continent. And because of that, that created economic reverberations not only throughout Europe but throughout the known world at that time, and that was a big part of why we even had World War One, much less World War II, which was just a continuation. And of course, World War III would be a terrible concept to even contemplate, but it would be a continuation of the other two wars. But we know that the Soviet Union lost 26 million people. And when you compare that figure with what happened in other countries throughout Europe and even in America and further away, and other participants who were drug into the World War II conflict, the numbers dwindle significantly, much lower than anywhere near 26 million. Most of them didn't even exceed 1 million. But Russia, because the war was fought on Russian soil primarily, and the soil of the Soviet Union, the countries in the Soviet Union, Poland, Ukraine, and Czechoslovakia, some of the other countries in Europe, that is why the casualties were so significant for Russia. And the other irony was that Russia wasn't in competition at the Berlin Conference for any of the African countries, so they could not receive the spoils of that war. So I think it's important for us to include, as we historically analyze, if we want to change this historic narrative, we have to change it ourselves. And we have to fight for the truth, and appreciate the opportunity to share some things on this format.
Absolutely. And we are going to you now, Purnima Anand. We are looking at the importance of the Victory Day celebration, May 9th, marking the 81st anniversary. And we want to understand how this event has become so institutionalized and its relevance in defining the future of the Russian Federation.
Thank you. In Russia, this year, Victory Day commemorates the Soviet Union's defeat over Nazism. Okay, and that time it was Second World War time, Cold War time, but it was a great patriotic war. But now, since that time till now, we can see Russia crossed very big line, and they always represent the dignity and sovereignty over the fascism, neocolonialism, and now we can say dollarism. Because now Russia is in sanctions since long time. When Ukraine-Russia operation started, whole world started to say that it is a war attack from Russia. But we can see that what is the significance of Victory Day in Russia. Because Victory Day always remind Russian generation, Russian people, the sacrifice of millions of people, of their grandfather, grandparents, and parents. And that time, I know because I closely research on some Russian issues of wartime and political, geopolitical time. We know that many villages, many cities become empty without man, because all men of those cities went to the war to save the sovereignty of their nation. And I must mark here the strong action of the women, because after war it was not only victory of that time, of that uh, army people, but later on it was a very great problem of the women in that areas, because there was no water, no electricity, and Russia is a freezing country, and only bounded people, children's, and no money, no food. That situation was existing, and women of Russian Federation worked and developed the legacy of USSR for the world. So this is a great nation. It gives so many examples to the world, and no doubt that Russian Federation is very strong. They are having currently very strong democratic system. We observe it, we visit it to even Donbass and many regions of Ukraine, which came in Russian Federation now. But problem is not only victory and fighting for your dignity. Problem is that why wars happens. Is it necessary that war should happen? What is the meaning of Israel and Hamas war? What is the meaning of current Israel and Iran war? Ultimately, no country win the other country. Wars are, time is stretching, and there is no result. And all countries are facing problem. Now whole world is facing the crisis of oil and gas, and inflation is increasing. Whole world leadership is disturbed. So why we cannot stop this wars? From that victory day till today, which victory we are going to achieve? We are only sacrificing the lives. Whatever development we do, it is destruct, and new companies get new orders. What is the meaning? When we will get the lesson that we need to live peacefully, and we need to live with dignity. We need to live with the combined efforts, joint efforts of our geographical positions. Whatever we have to contribute. So all these things and these wars are giving us lessons that we need to make coalition, we need to do cooperation. And Victory Day is the most important example in current world order that we need to do coalition, cooperation, and care for all nations. We will continue our dialogue in next phase of the dialogue.
Absolutely.
But I must say that as Putin in this year Victory Day speech said that this war is not ending. We are ending the hegemony of the Western world and NATO. So I hope these wars will give the lesson to the negative powers, and the world will go towards better future.
Absolutely. Subsequently, we will continue to unveil the importance of the Victory Day celebration, and of course, to learn history, how it is shaping the world of today. Like you have asked, is war actually necessary? Before answering that question, I'll come back to you, Conrad. This time around, let's look at the position of Poland, because if we are going back memory lane, we'll know that before Germany invaded the Soviet Union, we know the primary target was Poland. So let's try to answer this question or this opinion that has been coming from some pundits to say if actually back in the days was some sort of a proxy war where the Nazi Germany invaded planned an attack on Russia through Poland. And of course, answering this question is relevant to understanding how these agendas will always bring about controversy in the global setting, limiting the relevance of maybe globalization and bilateral or multilateral corporations.
Yeah, well, I would say that it was historically a very popular point of view that the Second World War started because of Poland. Yeah, and of course, especially British propaganda was mostly keen on presenting starting the war as a great effort to protect Poland and other in Eastern European nations from the Nazi domination. But of course, after decades of work of the historians, we know that wars do not start because of the political decisions only. They are not started because of some small problems in some villages in the borders between two countries. It's mostly they mostly start because of the big interests, big businesses interests especially. And I would like to agree with what Arthur said about the true and deep reasons of the great world conflicts in the 20th century, because it's exactly how it looked like. It was the struggle of imperialisms of European nations, colonial powers, mostly. We had to remember that this global perspective is very important to understand why Second World War and other conflicts like that starts. That's the point, because we have to remember that, of course, the very direct and first reason for the armed conflict in Europe was, in fact, in the German invasion against Poland. But we had to also remember that almost in the same time, Hitler prepared further demands from the Western powers, including return to the new share of the colonial imperiums. That was another step Hitler planned. So, for example, if Poland our allies from France and Britain accepted Hitler's demand, which he formulated toward Poland, the next demand of Hitler was to sit again to the table and divide, especially Africa, again between France, Britain, Germany, and Italy. That was obvious for him. That was one of his main purposes of escalating this conflict. That was a very important element, I would say. We had to also remember that for the minor countries or middle-sized countries like Poland, it is always very dangerous to be played by the superpowers. So Poland was used as a kind of direct reason for escalating the conflict and starting the war. I would say that I see something very similar when we observe present Polish position between the West and Russia. So against the Western powers declare that they support Poland, that they would like to sign another military aid treaties, another military contracts with the Polish companies and Polish army, just only to push Poland as a next victim of the hybrid war and then, direct war between West and Russia. So as the first and present field of war, there is Ukraine. The second one would be the Baltic states and Poland. And it's extremely dangerous, especially for the Poles. We had to think that if we observe in the global scale, return to the arm race, return to the jingoist propaganda of the Western part, when we observe another fronts of proxy wars all over the world. In Africa, we can see what is going on now in Mali, for example. When we observe situation in the between America and China about Taiwan, we see that this potential places of the new conflicts, of the new hybrid wars are spreading all over the world. And we are step by step closer to the global conflict, more or less similar like we were in the 30s. And that's something which is extremely dangerous for us all.
Absolutely, and it is imperative for us to understand as the world takes a different narrative in the aspect of multilateralism, and we want to understand again from your own perspective. Ultimately, when Conrad was talking, he highlighted the interests of big corporations, and of course businesses in capitalizing on uncertainties brought by war to redefine their own stance and maybe control global economy and decision making. So now I want to look at how the proxy information war in the times of the Second World War actually led to a divided Europe between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. I don't know if it's a moment for us to probably dwell on the Truman Doctrine or probably the Marshall Plan, that we see some sort of the contestation that comes with the Victory Day celebration, particularly the Russian way, as a result of such agendas that made the Western Europe somehow, vulnerable to the USA trying to maybe I don't know if we say redefine the map of Europe as a whole.
Well, the Anglo-American efforts to economically control the world cannot be understated in any of these world wars or what happened with international hegemony and its attempt to exploit colonialism and the rest of the world. All of this blends together. We do have to recognize that the economic positioning or jockeying for positioning of these major powers was really the backdrop and behind all of it. Of course, the European banking structures are still in defiance of a world order that says multipolarism is where the world must be. It's not a question of whether we can continue to have a unipolar world. It's actually it's existential that we have a multipolar world and we cannot allow the former to continue. So a divided world is very natural, and we have to get to a point where we have to understand that we have to share this one planet that we know of that we can survive on in the entire universe without destroying it and ourselves in the process. And that's a hard lesson for some people to learn because they go back to a time in Europe, in the Anglo-American structure where they're fighting among each other, and then they have to export that fight to the rest of the world for conquest and developing colonies. All of this was done in Europe first before it ventured out from that small sector of the world. And these people have never learned to live among themselves, much less live with the rest of us in the rest of the world. We certainly honor and appreciate the sacrifice of the people of the Soviet Union and Russia in particular in World War II because they were bearing the brunt of the struggle for economic domination and hegemony that was coming and growing out of a Nazi Germany structure, and what needed to occur in the rest of the world for the peace and tranquility of nations as far away as India and Pakistan and China, who were also being influenced by what was going on in Europe. and in Eastern Europe in particular. So losing 26 million people in that war caused the Russian people at that time, there was not one man, woman, or child in Russia that was not directly affected and did not lose a loved one in their own family. That was how devastating that 26 million people being lost in the war was to be felt in Russia. But we also have to recognize the Herero people in Namibia who were massacred in the millions at that time and immediately before World War I and World War II, that led into this practice of mass extermination of people. The German people were involved directly. That was a German colony in Namibia. And as a result of the death and destruction that they exacted on the people, the Herero people in particular, but not exclusively, because it bled into the Congo, Leopold, and what was going on in the Congo, mass extermination again there, where he killed 10 to 16 million Africans just to clear the area of population. Those practices were exactly what was later on perpetuated in Europe and caused things that we discuss now as the Holocaust and the death and destruction that went on throughout Europe. They practiced that. They developed those techniques and those strategies from what they did to the Herero people in Africa, and we cannot allow these discussions to continue and the framing of what happened in these wars without including what happened in Africa.
Absolutely, looking at what happened some 250 years ago is still actually resonating in the world of today. And now, during the second phase, we continue to analyze and centering now on the speech, the Victory Day speech by President Vladimir Putin, a discourse that actually attracted some negative interpretation, particularly from mainstream media, especially on the presence as far as the military parade was concerned. With you, Purnima Anand, what can you say holistically represented the speech of Russian President Vladimir Putin 2026 May 9th Victory Day commemoration? Did you see that as a moment of probably showing to the world that the Russian people stand united, remembering the horrors of the past and how they can shape their country to prevent future occurrences, because we are already seeing the proxy war happening in Ukraine. And of course, some also said that the limited appearance in the military parade actually presented the fact that Russia is recording a lot of losses as far as the special military operation is concerned. Do you have the same interpretation to this, or you have another narrative patterning the 2026 speech by the Russian strongman, Vladimir Putin? Your mic is muted, please.
Thank you for a very good question. Clarice, first of all, victory. We are today discussing Victory Day. Victory Day is very important, and it is giving very good impression to whole world, especially in BRICS countries and Global South. Today you are from the African channel. I would like to connect, because in Africa also since long time, African communities are fighting for their dignity. And Nelson Mandela opened a chapter of freedom in Africa. and Africa and South Africa is its rainbow, his dreams rainbow, where Africa also fight against the colonialism. Still, many countries are fighting. This Victory Day is not only important in Russian Federation, in India also long back in 1947, India got the freedom from British colonialism.
Sure.
And still India and Pakistan divided after their when they defeated, they divide India and Pakistan. So Victory Day is not only Russian symbol in current new world order. Russian Victory Day is first of all very impressive parade in Moscow with Black Army and everybody come out for immortal assembly. Even President Putin also come with flowers and he pay the tribute to his ancestors. Similarly, every Russian people, because Russia is very big geographical country, many zones, time zones they have. But on Victory Day, they all unite. They all come together on roads and they pay tributes to their elders. And it summarized that they are having such vibration that if nation need, we shall give up our life for the sovereignty and dignity. So this is an example in the world that for our sovereignty, we need to sacrifice our life, and nobody is important than the sovereignty of the nation. Our current wars are going on, and we saw that Iran is strongly fighting against Israel. And it is not direct Israel and Iran war, it is a pressure of America and American support. So we are looking that small nations or big nation like Russia, they all are coming under war crisis. And who is creating this pressure and how we resolve it? This is very important today to discuss. When we are questioning what is the importance of Victory Day, we should understand that time of history and current world order, because world is dividing in two powers, two pillars. One pillar is the desire of the governments. Every government of every nation is in problem because they created artificial system around them where corruption and politics is very high. And due to this corruption and politics, common people who are at the side of uh, very poor conditions, they are not getting food, they are not getting health needs, and their children are not getting education. So these kind of people are existing in the world. We are having more than 8 billion population. Out of that, I think 80% population is one side and 20% population who is at very high end, in high politics, high scientific researches. Even they are doing research on Mars and Moon. But in Earth, many people are dying due to hunger. Another side, many young people are dying in these wars. Are these wars are important? What celebration we will do if one country will win? We are in the age of artificial intelligence. We are having resources. We can understand geographical conditions. Russia is having freezing environment. Gulf countries are having hot desert environment. So why we are struggling and why we are giving our lives, why we are not getting lesson from the Victory Day of Russian Federation or any other country's Victory Day? So this is the important discussion today in our in Globus channel, and many international experts are present. And as Steve said, that he's from US, and he said very good words about Victory Day. We are understanding that world is uniting, not dividing due to this wars, and we are not having interest in the wars. We can celebrate Victory Days. So we should think towards positive side, towards unity, towards care. And I feel that Victory Day of Russian Federation really anchoring in the world stage that victory is important, but another side, we need collaboration and cooperation for our future generations. Thank you.
Indeed, for the future generation, but it remains relevant to ask questions that matter, questions that will define the contemporary society, especially in geopolitical framing and contemporary narratives. Back to you, Conrad Request. Let's look at the situation in the global world at the moment, like Purnima Anand noted. Of course, Victory Day celebration has become a holistic event, a global event, because the wind of change that is blowing across the African continent is, of course, as a result of the remembrance of the past and how the continent can get out of the entanglement of imperialism and other vices actually retarding continental emancipation at every front. But then when we look at a Victory Day celebration, particularly with the case study of the Russian Federation, we want to ask a very important question, because taking us down memory lane, we'll see that ideologies actually serve as a point of conflict between countries in Western and Eastern Europe, and probably it is still happening in today's world. So how can we use the lessons of the past to now see how geopolitical framing can be done that will limit such escalations that will consume or probably engulf human life? So we are talking about a war that consumed or engulfed about 26 million Soviet citizens. And today we are still seeing the geopolitical confrontations. We're seeing physical confrontations, and even confrontations along lines of information. So how can the lessons of the past bring us to framing a geopolitical standing, especially in line with security and defense too, to avoid reliving the horrors of the past in this globalized society that it's in the fourth industrial revolution?
Well, yeah, who doesn't learn from the history mistakes and errors is doomed to repeat them. That's that's obvious, I believe. Well, sometimes it's quite direct relations between the past and historical experience and the present events. For example, I strongly believe that ignoring how deep and important was Russian experience of the Second World War and all this massive scale of Soviet victims was one of the reasons why the West didn't appreciate enough how sensitive is Russia and Russian people toward any form of aggression, even verbal one, how they well, want to protect themselves from being again surrounded by only enemies, how they are very sensitive and would like to prevent any attempts to came closer to Moscow with any kind of aggressive military installations. That exactly explains Russians' reaction on NATO presence in Ukraine. That was exactly that is exactly one of the things when the West doesn't understand what we call Russian spirit, Russian way of thinking of history and of geopolitics. That is very direct relation between the historical experience and present events. Of course, again, returning to the global perspective of the World War II and its present reminiscences, we have to remember again, for example, that Second World War wasn't anything outside from, for example, from any continent. In fact, Even in the countries which are not formally involved in war, there are very strong influence of the war situation, even if, for example, in South America. But in Africa, when we are returning to this example, was directly involved into war because of the no-colonial domination over the continent. One of the first steps toward the war was Italian invasion against Ethiopia, against Abyssinia. And in the East Africa was one of the fronts of this war because of the fight between the British and Italian colonial troops. The whole campaign of course, have been provided also in the North Africa. Kenyan and Golden Coast soldiers from Africa fought in the British colonial forces in Burma against the Japanese, and so on and so on. Well, we had to also think about the Second World War as one of the very strong impulses leading to the decolonization, because the former colonial powers lost a lot of its potential, and it was also let's call it that way. It was also a big lesson for the African or South Asian people to learn that, of course, they want us only to use as a tools in their wars. Why we have to fight for them? That was one of things. I think that it was kind of enlightenment for the African and Asian people, allowing all the pro-independence movements to spread their influence over these nations. Well, it was also the starting points of many armed movements, especially in South Asia, against first Japanese, but then also against the colonial powers, like we know from Malaysia, from Indonesia, from Vietnam. That was this experience which was absolutely crucial for decolonization. And when we look at this present situation, we also see that these past mistakes, past errors, and past problems repeat automatically in our times. We have to remember that one of the Nazis' goals in this Second World War was extermination of Slavs. Whole world know about the Holocaust of Jews, knows about the final solution, but hardly no one heard about extermination of Slav on the massive scale of Russians, Belarusians. 1/3 of the Belarusian people have been murdered, killed, and died during the war. Poland's number of victims is about 6 million. So it's a massive number, huge number, uncomparable, for example, to the, with all the respect to the, I don't know, British one, for example. Holocaust of Serbs as well, who've been, exterminated by the German occupants. And when we look at the Balkans, we can see how Germans and Italians, Nazis and fascists, used local Nazi movements against the people of these states. And we can see it again. That's exactly what we observe in Ukraine. It's hard to believe now, but 81 years after the Victory Day, after signing the surrender, unconditional surrender of the Nazis, we can see, in fact, Nazis in power. Neo-Nazis or historical Nazis back in power in Kiev. There are a lot of monuments commemorating Nazi collaborators now in present Ukraine, and that is also the sign of the times. We can see that in Baltic states, in Latvia and in Estonia, there are officially commemorations of war provided by the people in the uniforms of Waffen SS, which is something which unbelievable a couple of decades ago. And that's exactly what we see. It's not only another imperialistic and colonial clash, it's also great return of the Nazi ideology as well in our times. It's really hard to believe that, but it's something which is happening now, and so this is two very important factors strongly interacting in this stage. We see again increase of Nazi ideology and Nazi practice in some parts of the world, and we can see increase of the business interest in war, because there is no business like war business.
Indeed, we continue to invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to leave your comments. We are actually live on YouTube, Pan-African Media, and Facebook, Pan-African Media TV. So you can leave your comments on what you think about the topic and how the Victory Day celebration is actually marking the present contemporary society, especially in line with cooperation, international cooperation, and of what relevance is this history in shaping the world's security agenda, and it's also maybe a geopolitical calendar. And just to note that, ladies and gentlemen, we've just been joined by Mateusz Piskowski, who is joining us from Poland, journalist and also a political scientist. You are welcome to this discursive program as we continue to analyze the events of the May 9th that marked the 81st anniversary of the Victory Day, when the Soviet Union defeated Nazi Germany, the era of the Second World War. You are welcome, dear Mateusz, as we continue to analyze the stakes, especially surrounding the fact that today, according to some information, some countries, countries in Europe have already made illegal the use of the ribbon, signifying the St. George ribbon, and how countries are invalidating the importance of such an event like the Victory Day that brings memories of lots and lots of lives lost, especially during the fighting that actually culminated with the defeat of Nazi Germany. You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I would like to stress that history has become politics. We call, in my country, in Poland, history, the propagation of historical narratives, something like the politics of history or politics of remembrance. And that's the problem, according to me. I mean, the main current of historians now in Europe, those historians who are financed, sponsored by state structures, have to fulfill the wishes, have to disseminate the narratives of the mainstream. And the political mainstream, as you know, is trying to, yes, definitely invalidate the victory of 1945, is trying to do that due to political or geopolitical reasons, of course, because, well, if Russia is a threat, then it cannot be the country which had its great victory over the Third Reich, because otherwise, I mean, everything must be black and white, according to the historical propagandists in Europe, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, just to depict Russia as the Schwarzhag, the black character, the evil and so on of contemporary Europe. This is the main reason of all which is happening around the anniversary. This is not for the first time, of course. It is a long process. I would just like to remind you that several years ago, I think it was about 14 or 15 years ago, European Parliament has voted and drafted a resolution which was, let's say, making some parallels between Stalin and Hitler, between the Soviet Union and the Third Reich, a resolution which make the guilt of Soviet Union and of the Third Reich equal the guilt when it comes to starting the Second World War, their guilt when it comes to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and so on and so on. So this is a part of a great narrative, of a great political narrative, not a historical narrative. And this is why we have all those issues and problems with Russia. Also this year, also when it comes to this particular anniversary. Unfortunately, I fear that the tendency, the trend will continue in the coming years because due to, let's say, geopolitical confrontation between the West and Russia, this narrative is needed. This narrative is needed, and this narrative is demanded by those political forces from European mainstream. This narrative is particularly strong, as I have mentioned, in Central and Eastern European countries, which are on the eastern flank of NATO, and being on the eastern flank of NATO means also being on the eastern flank of, let's say, historical offensive, historical attack against contemporary Russia and its historical identity. That's why all those countries, including my country, Poland, have already established special state institutions like the Institute of National Remembrance or National Memory in Poland, in Ukraine, in several Baltic countries. So we might say that almost all countries neighboring with Russia, almost all countries neighboring with, even with former Soviet Union, or those who were in the Soviet Union in the past, I mean the Baltic republics and Ukraine, have already established state institutions which are responsible for historical propaganda. And in my opinion, this is the main problem. If any historian in all those countries would try to, let's say, publish an unbiased opinion about 1945, he would be deprived of state funding. He could be also deprived of his post at the university. So they face really serious problems. So, of course, this is part of censorship, but this is also part of, let's say, enhancing and supporting certain historical narratives about 1945. That's why it might sound like a paradox, but well, I would like to read and hear more and more about the Second World War and about 1945, not only from the Russians, because their perspective might be also biased, yes, but from researchers, from historians from other continents, non-European researchers, because well, their distance and their ability to research in an unbiased way, in a scholar, scientific, academic way, is definitely better, and they are not under such pressure as historians from European countries, from those countries which participated in the Second World War. So we have a real problem here. And well, I would like just to recommend you not to read most of the historical textbooks and even historical scientific articles published in English as well and in other languages by the state-sponsored scholars from Poland, from Baltic states, from Ukraine particularly, which is exerting, I think, the most cruel pressure when it comes to historical censorship and limitations of research. That's very important, and I'm glad that you are discussing this.
I will stay with you, Matthias. You talk about the narratives or agenda setting, and then when we're looking at the events of the Second World War, we then understand why it is imperative to mark Victory Day. So, in your own perspective, to what extent is the Victory Day vital for domestic consolidation or probably international messaging? Domestic in terms of public policy dynamics, especially with the leadership, and of course, international messaging that will probably not give a blank picture of the contemporary Russia's foreign policy dynamics. We quite remember that recently President Putin said that the country is actually facing some sort of foreign policy challenges as far as the event regarding Russia is being presented in the global world, especially in Western Europe and elsewhere. How can we actually use this to maybe bring relevance to domestic consolidating and international messaging?
Well, it's a hard task, I think. But anyway, I think that regardless all this pressure exerted by state structures in several countries, I think it's important to participate in deep scientific dialogue, academic dialogue with our Russian counterparts, with people from those countries who are still able to make their own historical research and to continue their unbiased academic work in that field. Nevertheless, well, there was a good option for solving all those issues some time ago, in times of the so-called reset of relations between the West, or at least part of the West, and Russia. So it was back in 2011, 2012, when we had, for instance, in our relations, in Polish-Russian relations, we had a special group of historians, a common group of historians, Russian and Polish historians, who have published their common researches, their common academic works. And I think this was a good solution for that. At that time, it was, let's say, supported, sponsored, and even patroned by our state, by our countries, because it was the period of the so-called reset of our relations. And now we cannot count on such support. On the opposite, I think that those scholars, those historians who would dare to discuss with their Russian counterparts could become subjects of repressions, of well, at least censorship in their home countries. Anyway, there is still a small possibility, a small room for dialogue, a small room where independent scholars, particularly independent scholars, because only the independent scholars are able to discuss all those issues without being repressed or without having fear of being expelled from their university posts and so on. So I think that there is a small room, a small chance to revive this historical dialogue. Some of the Russian institutions, some of Russian NGOs still try to do that. They try to be more or less open for the voices from the independent voices from Europe and from other continents about the Second World War. And what's very dangerous for us, I think, is becoming a part of the war of different narratives. Yes, I mean, both sides, of course, have their own narrative. The Western narrative is definitely more aggressive now and definitely more false and manipulative when it comes to Second World War. Anyway, I still believe that there's a small group of independent scholars from different parts of the world who could continue or who could start, in some cases, their unbiased professional historic research about different aspects of the Second World War. I mean, we should, for instance, first and foremost, become more aware of the geopolitical consequences of the Second World War, of the geopolitical reasons of the break of the Second World War. These were fundamental issues which were, let's say, it was not necessary to explain all those issues in the past, but now it seems that due to this historical propaganda, due to this falsification of contemporary history, we are in an urgent need to remind all those things which seemed to be obvious some time ago. So there's a lot of work to do, and being a historian nowadays is something very risky, I would say, in different countries, because those who control historical narratives control contemporary political life, contemporary directions in our everyday politics. So the politicians understand that without that losing control over historical narratives, also when it comes to, or maybe particularly when it comes to 1945 and the Second World War, is something dangerous for them, because their legitimacy, their political, geopolitical, international legitimacy depends on this narrative. In our case, this narrative is false. So if we would understand widely that this narrative is false, they would lose one of the pillars of their legitimacy, of their contemporary political legitimacy. That's why it's so dangerous for the ruling elites and for, let's say, this geopolitical direction which has been chosen by the mainstream of European, or to say more widely, of Western politics. Thank you.
More time before you go, Matthias, sir. Just to say, as a political scientist, according to some information, it has been alleged that there was a lot of, complacency coming, especially from the United Nations. And of course, here, according to this information, the German Chancellor actually noted that his grandfather, Joseph Paul, as a mayor, renamed streets in honor of Hitler, and was a member of the Nazi Party. Merz himself, that's the German Chancellor, claimed that his grandfather was forced to join the party because of his official position, of course. And we want to look at also Poland's position, where actually the Prime Minister of Poland acknowledged that it's actually debatable that his grandfather, Joseph Turk, served in the 1944 and allegedly participated in the construction of the Stuttgart concentration camp, among other examples that have featured regarding this. We want to look at how international complacency among, this organization has made the probably resolving global conflict a very complex situation, and how lessons from the victory day, or from the history of the 1945 Second World War can bring us into maybe making recommendations, especially political, geopolitical, and most especially diplomatic recommendations that can curtail the physical confrontations and the probably losses, especially human losses, in terms of eras of war, physical war. I beg your pardon.
Well, for us in Poland, it's something obvious that it's very hard to find anyone in Germany, even among the political elites of contemporary Germany, who doesn't have a grandfather or great-grandfather in the ranks of NSDAP or in the ranks of SS or other structures which were deemed, let's say, guilty of crimes against humanity, of genocide, and so on. Because if you look at the numbers, the simple numbers of from the times of the Third Reich, you will notice that, well, it would be really, really hard to find people who are not involved in a Second World War. We cannot, let's say, understand or find real motivations of their political choices from that times. Yes, because those people are dead, and those who are not dead, very few of them, will of course say and explain that, well, I was forced to, and so on. So that's also something very obvious. Yes, this is the question of contemporary identity of Germany. And there were different periods in Germany when it comes to those issues. There was a period when the current called Anti-Deutsche, which means anti-Germans, were forming the identity of contemporary German Federal Republic. Those forces were, let's say, trying to reject all the not the guilt, yes, but on the other hand, on the opposite, they were trying to reject being German as such, yes. So German consciousness, German identity, and so on was rejected by them. Actually, there was such a current, but it was back in 1970s, 1980s. Now it's not so strong anymore, I think. Then you had the current of Germans who were ready to admit their guilt, yes, but who felt guilty for their ancestors only when it came to one particular nation of the victims of the Second World War. Yeah, that's another tendency in Germany. I mean, even if you look at the compensations, purely material, financial compensations for the heirs of the victims of the Second World War, Germany always focused on the Israeli victims. Yes, so Germany, of course, admitted its collective guilt of the extermination of European Jews, but when it comes to their crimes against other European nations, when it comes particularly to their crimes against Soviet people after the invasion of Soviet Union in 1941, they say nothing about that. Yes, I think that even before, it's not the issue of the current situation in Germany, but even before you had a particular narrative in Germany when it comes to Soviet Union, for instance, the German soldiers from who died or who were captured during the Stalingrad battle were presented as heroes anyway in Germany from their historical perspective, yes, as well as other German soldiers who fought on the Eastern Front, on the so-called Ostfront during the Second World War. So when it comes to Germany, I think it's very, very hard to find anyone, maybe with one exception, with those people who came to Germany after the Second World War. I mean, people of different origins, of Eastern European origins, of non-European origins who live there, and they feel German, of course, but they have nothing to do with the history of the Third Reich and so on, and of the Second World War. So actually, majority of the Germans has this collective identity, and they have to acknowledge, and they do acknowledge that historical narrative is very important for the contemporary position of Germany in world politics, in European politics, and that the historical narrative is as well very, very important for, let's say, drafting the geopolitical role of today Germany. I mean, if Germany is now on the forefront, is becoming a kind of avant-garde when it comes to aggressive stance, militarized aggressive stance against Russia, yes, then Germany has to forget all these, let's say, historical connections, associations with the Second World War, with Operation Barbarossa and so on, with their attack on Soviet Union from 1941. And they have to forget about it, to bury this narrative under the ground, to not to talk about it anymore, and to try to let's say depict contemporary Russia as the main source of violence, of aggression, of all contemporary problems of Europe. And that's why the Germans also, I mean, for the first time, I think in Berlin this year, the German police has reacted in some parts of Berlin, in Treptower Park, on the territory near the cemetery of the Soviet soldiers, of the fallen Soviet soldiers from 1945. They have reacted quite aggressively when they noticed that people wore, Russian flags, ribbons, or red flags, and so on. Yes, before they didn't do that. I mean, the German law enforcement forces. This year, several people have noticed that it was hard in Germany on the 9th of May, on the anniversary to commemorate the Soviet victims, the Soviet soldiers who died in 1945 in Germany. So this is something is actually changing, yes. And as I have told before, this is all about using historical narrative for political or even geopolitical aims, quite contemporary political, geopolitical aims and goals, followed now by contemporary Germany. But again, Germany is very, let's say, specific issue when it comes to Europe. Although, of course, I might say now that practically only my country, only my nation, only the Polish people in our part of Europe did not participate in, let's say, the system of aggression created by the Third Reich. Almost all the others have participated in that. I mean, all these foreign GOs of SS, of Waffen-SS, and so on. So most of the Europeans have, in their own family stories, in their own spoken traditions, let's say, several different narratives. Yes, I mean, a Ukrainian, for instance, might have one grandfather who fought in the ranks of the Red Army, yeah. And on the other hand, he can have another grandfather who fought in the ranks of Waffen-SS Division Galicia, for instance. Yes, so different historical narratives are present when it comes to our roots, to our families, but it's the state which chooses this narrative, which should be dominant according to contemporary geopolitical goals.
Indeed, very essential in framing a contemporary agenda of the new world order. Thank you so much, dear Matthias. And now we continue, ladies and gentlemen, with you, Otto Mobley. From what we have gathered from Matthias Peskoski, we have seen how actually history has been politicized. But then how can we use this year's framing of actually the 1945? Let's look at the meeting point between the NATO narrative, Europe, and probably the Russian Federation, in line with framing narratives, taking facts from actually what happened during the Second World War to frame security debater in contemporary world, and how can we actually present such narratives that are far from, politicizing history for geopolitical gains.
Well, certainly when we talk about geopolitics, we cannot leave any segment of the world out. That's been the mistake of the past, is that we let certain elements tell their stories and others are just doomed to just not be heard. Great to hear from my Polish comrade, brother in media, and glad to hear from others on this program who've contributed. And I know that Steve had to leave, but just wanted to go back and remind everyone that it is a new day. It is a new time. We have new tools to use that we didn't have even 10, 20, 30 years ago. The internet, I'm speaking of, and the ability to affect the international narrative is never before explored by the people who I'm talking about, who are in the rest of the world, who don't get a chance and an opportunity to do programs even like this. The only thing that becomes the differing factor is its own popularity, its own promotion, our abilities to find programs like this and tune in and listen to those programs, learn from those programs, and then move that information forward. But it is absolutely essential, but also a great opportunity now for us to take command of the narrative, tell these truths. And I will just want to emphasize, the truth is always the first casualty of war. And even my own father died as a result of injuries he sustained in World War II. So it's not like this is a ancient, generational, long time ago story. It is very contemporary for us. So, and even if it was my grandfather who had, and my grandfather did, fought in World War I. My father died of injuries he sustained in North Africa, fighting against the Germans and the Italians in North Africa. They were all across North Africa with that war effort. So we are affected still today, even though we didn't celebrate or didn't even observe and went by without even a quiet notice here in the United States that May 9th was even a observance of anything. So until we can make sure that the observances of other people in other parts of the world, whether we're talking about May 9th, of what happened with the Russian people, or we're talking about what happened with people in India or China or other parts of the world, we're not going to respect and begin to understand the multipolar world that we have to shape and live in. I'm happy that we have a representative of BRICS in the discussion today. I think it's extremely important that we understand that the BRICS countries have to emerge, but they're not going to emerge if it's left people who have controlled the narrative, as I say. We just had recently in this country Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and others who were going on a circuit of discussions to say, we're losing control of the narrative. We've got to regain control of the narrative. And they were expressing that because of the proliferation of programs like this. The internet was becoming a source of information for people throughout the world. So it's really important that we find ways to continue to tell our stories. Malcolm X, his birthday is coming up in another few days on the 19th of May. We'll be observing and celebrating that. How many people around the rest of the world will be doing that? Even though I know Malcolm X's birthday is a holiday in dozens of countries around the world, it's not an observance here in the United States. So things are changing, but they're changing too slow. And we really do have to grab the opportunities, seize the opportunities that we have at hand right now to enforce the ideas and the facts and the truth that we all participated in the development of the world to this point. And if we want a world going forward, we're going to have to become more vigilant and more participatory and more aggressive about messaging. I would love to see the BRICS countries develop their own networks, their own counter media strategies. I'll come and do it myself. If anybody from BRICS is out there or any other countries around the world, I've been developing media in this country for years. But it's not going to be done if we think about it in terms of, oh, we got to wait for the mainstream media to hire this person or that person, or people of color, and that kind of nonsense. We have to do this ourselves and get out of this particular hole. But we do need to emphasize that everyone has truth to tell and truth and facts to share, and we have to get to those stories so that we understand what's happened to people, whether they were in Poland or whether they were in India. The war was affecting them at the same time. If they were in Africa, the war was being fought on African soil. That's why they called it World War II, World War I, because it was an international war. And there was an axis at that time of not only Germany and Italy, but we can't forget what was going on in the Pacific with Japan and its wars against China. Those are things that are still being felt today, but they're not understood by those of us who have not had an opportunity to share those stories with our own constituents. So appreciate this opportunity, and we want to say just a thank you to you, Clarice, and what you're doing.
Thank you so much, dear Otto Mobley, for always making yourself available to contribute constructively in bringing out the alternative information to the global audience. It's about messaging, like you said. And I will be rounding off with you, Conrad Raquez. We just highlighted a very important aspect of messaging. And when we are looking at the Victory Day celebration, it is already marked by so much of controversy, given that local communities in border cities actually navigate this commemoration in different ways, bringing some sort of many questions to be asked, particularly by the younger generation still trying to circumvent or to understand the history of the Second World War and how it affected cross-border relationship. Here we are talking about the decision in to be a case study in Estonia, just a stone throw from, especially to the Russian Federation, and how conflicting ideas or messaging regarding the Victory Day celebration is somehow making history to be more cumbersome and complex, making it so difficult to interpret in contemporary society marked by new realities of aggressive geopolitical contestation by the hegemon not wanting the changes which are very real in the world.
Well, yeah, I would say that we said a lot about narrative, about the language we use, with propaganda we are witnessing now. But we have to also think about the practice, the practical conclusions of these propaganda efforts of the mainstream media and politicians. Well, for example, historically, it was agreed that one of the most important and, well, horrible experiences of the Second World War was the Holocaust. And of course, there were a lot of political promises and declarations that event as such could not happen again in any, acceptable way. That all the world will react if anything like that could be again planned and perpetuated. But well, we now exactly know that it's absolutely not true. That these declarations have been false. Because we observe now and for many years true and real Holocaust of the Palestinian people in the occupied Palestine, and there's absolutely no negative reactions from the Western world, from the side of the states, which already so many times declared that they never accept genocide again. So we can now verify how false was this propaganda and how it was only focused on practical political goals of the imperialist colonial powers. Well, we also see how these practical implications of the false narrative, of the false history, are spreading over the world. Mateusz mentioned that well, for decades it was absolutely unimaginable to have German governments, German authorities forbidding the signs of the victory over Nazism. All base of the German Federal Republic ethos was based over victory over Nazism and overworking the results of Nazism. Nazi domination over Germans. So they had to accept also that all these symbols of the monuments, of the symbols of the victory over Nazism, victory which mainly effort was on side of the Soviet Union, are visible, are present, and are accepted and also appreciated by the present generation of Germans. And now this year, for the very first time in history, they forbidden to show the flags of the Red Army, which conquered Berlin. They forbid to any symbols which could be related to this historical effort of Soviets and the whole coalition to win the war. And in the same time, Germany has no problem, and German governments, of course, has no problem with accepting neo-Nazi government in Ukraine. So we see how these changes in language have practical consequences in the present world and in world of politics. They are very practical consequences in the geopolitical level as well. So again, we had to overwork not only this historical experience, not only to see how, for example, is different perspective of the Second World War in Russia and different is in Germany and different is in the United States. We have to understand that all these different points of view, but we also had to see and have some kind of distance to observe the practical results and what could lead us to these changes. So we have to understand that if we do not practically overwork experience of the World War II, we would be very easily pushed to World War III.
Absolutely close to World War III. Some pundits say we are already facing or experiencing World War III ideologically and otherwise. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much because we've come to the end of today's edition of Global Insights. We want to apologize for the, some sort of technical hurdles, which we actually witnessed at the beginning of the program, but we are working fervently to ensure that we continue to bring you what actually matters and what is not distorted, as we continue to learn from the past to reshape the future. And thank you for the great analysis, gentlemen and lady. And to the technical crew, thank you for ensuring that the program was a success. A success. Just to note that, ladies and gentlemen, before we go, we have actually understood the interpretation of the alternative interpretation of the Victory Day celebration, and of course understanding why there are some sorts of controversies, either from the way the Victory Day celebration is commemorated in the Russian Federation and in Western Europe. And it brings us back memory lane to know that history is never still, but actually it stands as a preamble for today and the future in shaping global narratives that will concretize multilateralism, and of course with the doctrine of institutions like the BRICS Plus, and also with the Pan-African philosophy of contemporary world that is, presenting the alternative narrative to ensure that countries are not felt, are not seen wanting in their own history, and also to note that it is imperative, especially as the younger population wanting to integrate the understanding of international relations and globalization, to understand how history can sometimes be distorted and transformed into a political tool. So it is imperative to serve as levels of alternative and constructive information that will serve humanity and give meaning to bilateral, multilateral dealings, and most especially to the concept of globalization in a transformative world. Thank you, and I wish you a lovely moment as you stay tuned on programs on the Pan-African media. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You by Globus.